Hello and welcome. I'm Joanne Witt. I'm on the pastoral staff at Calvary Presbyterian Church in San Francisco, currently covering for Joanne Lee, the Associate Pastor for Community Formation, while Joanne is on parental leave and sabbatical. Education and exploration are part of Calvary's mission, and normally we offer a range of classes throughout the year on topics addressing social justice, spiritual formation, Bible study, theology, and more. We can't gather in person as we could before the COVID-19 pandemic, so instead we're taking advantage of technology so that we can keep offering opportunities for learning in the context of the life of faith. The report and conversation you're about to hear is one of a series of recorded presentations put together by our adult education team, and we invite you to look for more of these conversations in the future. As we get started, I invite you to join me in prayer. God of grace, we thank you for the technology that allows us to gather and to continue learning, even as we shelter in place. We thank you for the commitment of those who helped make this happen today. As we gather, open our hearts to hear and see something new, something fresh about how your Spirit is at work in the world, and especially here in the Bay Area. Inspire us to greater understanding, greater compassion, and greater faithfulness. Amen. Today, we'll take a look at how the pandemic has intensified the homelessness crisis in San Francisco. We'll hear from the Reverend Victor Floyd, one of my colleagues on the pastoral staff at Calvary, and from Alison Faison, Calvary's Director of Children's Ministry, but here today wearing a different hat. Both Alison and Victor are active in Faith in Action Bay Area, a group of faith community leaders who organize for social justice. Faith in Action advocates respect and opportunity for all people, drawing together religious professionals from all over the Bay Area and from all faith traditions. We'll also hear from Kelley Cutler, a member of St. Dominic's Catholic Church in San Francisco. You may recognize Kelley as she led a class at Calvary on Prop C, Our City, Our Home, in 2018. Kelley is a human rights organizer at the Coalition on Homelessness in San Francisco, which is the home of the Street Sheet. She has specialized in the field of social work for over 20 years, working with the poor and marginalized populations in San Francisco. We'll close our presentation with some questions from Kathy Baer, who is the chair of Calvary's adult education team. And now I'm delighted to turn the program over to Victor.
Thank you, Joanne. When Jesus was born, he was homeless. That was not a mistake. When God chose to come to this world, God chose to be born to a poor couple. Think of all the situation around Jesus' birth. All of that was intentional. To teach us, to invite us to grow, and to invite us into communion with the poor, with one another, with the other. Jesus went on to minister and to heal, to save, and to say, "What you have done to the least of these, my children, you have done to me." A couple of years ago, a UN official was touring San Francisco and issued a statement that said that our situation and how we regard the unhoused citizens of our city is appalling. Some of the worst she'd seen in the world. She said it is systemic and it is intentional. We are a city of billionaires. If we cannot solve homelessness any better than this, it's our own fault. It is a choice. It is willful. It's the basis of our theology that God stands with the outcast, with the oppressed, and with the poor. Jesus showed us that. He stood against the empire and with the outcast. So, this is our call today, and it is not a small call. I want to introduce you. I think Joanne has already done so, but this is more personal. Kelley Cutler has become a friend of mine, and her work with the Coalition on Homelessness is something I admire and I stand in awe of every day. She goes to where the pain is greatest, and she offers her very life to serve the homeless and the poor of San Francisco. I asked her how we could help, and she said what you've heard already. Right now, even charity is helping to fix the problem somewhat. Take a sandwich to someone. Introduce yourself to someone on the street. Say hello. Get to know them. If you see them being mistreated, pull out your phone and record it. That is your right as a citizen. Remember that these are children of God and victims of a system that was designed for them to be there. So, with those of you who have not run screaming yet from the room, I am now very excited to share with you some of the work of Kelley Cutler, who will be reporting from the front lines. Over to Kelley.
Okay, so I have City Hall behind me, and there is a large encampment right on this side behind the library and the Asian Art Museum. And the police had pushed them down there. But if you look, okay, am I making everyone dizzy now? If you look here at Civic Center, the park is completely empty. And they have not been using any of the rec and park facilities for emergency response where people can seek refuge. At this point, this is the very first one that they've actually created. Up until this point, they've not had any alternatives for people on the street. We've been getting tents out to people so that people could get at least that, the bare minimum to keep safe during shelter in place.
Well, since the whole thing with COVID-19 and San Francisco, the homeless population, we've had an encampment down here at the library. And we started it on our own over here on the gravel side by the museum. And there's approximately somewhere between 50 and 75 people with tents over here. And we've been doing it ourselves because we're exempt from the shelter-in-place order from Gavin Newsom. And so we've been handling it on our own with our tents, which we got not from the city. And trying to stop the spread of the infection over here. It's been going pretty well as far as we know. There hasn't been any major incidents with the COVID-19 itself, and there hasn't really been anybody too noticeably sick over here, so it seems to have been going pretty well, except we've had a few problems with the police. The Tenderloin Police Department has been down here quite a few times. They're down here every night during the daytime typically. You know, at nighttime they flash their lights and they make lots of loud noises with their different horns and stuff they have on their car. One night in particular, they were doing donuts in our parking lot. You know, trying to disturb the encampment while they're sleeping, you know, just joking around, but they don't realize or they don't care that it's a major disturbance for us. Also, you know, the organizations have been great. They've been handing out food and stuff to us, and even the ones that aren't working with the city, particularly on the handing out food. They've been doing it on their own accord, or supplies, safe injection supplies, all that stuff. So that's been great. You know, and the mayor herself, you know, she's pretty much put it out there that she's not going to help us get into rooms unless we're sick with COVID-19 or showing symptoms of it. They procured a number of rooms, but they're empty, you know, and they've only housed, I think, like 900 something people, they claim, when she was originally supposed to get 8,250 rooms. And she's only gotten a short amount of those, and filled even less than that, you know. So we've just been having to make do with our tents, or, you know, being on the sidewalk or the street, trying to stay, you know, 6 feet apart, and, you know, washing our hands and doing everything else, wearing masks, you know, till, it's been like that entirely until recently. Just today, they moved people over to the other encampment on the other side, which is in the parking lot, and there's been some issues with that, you know, because it's a work in progress, I guess, you know. We'll see how that turns out.
Because the mayor was talking about, with all, you know, that people were coming from other places.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, there was such a large encampment here, but
Right.
How did, yeah.
There hasn't, from what I can tell.
Or how did it become, sorry.
Right.
But, how it grew so quickly, this encampment.
It was only like us, a few, like 8 tents at the beginning, and then, I mean, this whole side was not full at the beginning. The whole thing was not full. It was just a few people. But as they started clearing encampments up the hill in the Tenderloin, the police up there decided to start sending people down in droves down here, at, you know, large groups of people carrying their tents and stuff, and we've seen them come down, and they told them to come here. They told them to come here in large numbers. So overnight, pretty much, there was a whole encampment. And they were all telling us that they had been sent down by the cops to come down here and come to this particular camp. So between that and the lack of hotel rooms that we're allowed to procure because the mayor refuses to fill them, we've had to make an additional camp over here, well, the city did, to put people farther apart from each other, you know, and make it a safe encampment. So we've been deemed not safe on this side. So all along, I mean, it's been, you know, us doing what we can for ourselves, you know, and trying to do as best we can to do the shelter in place without being ordered to, you know. If we're exempt, the city doesn't have to provide for us. So they kind of like swept it under the table, you know, until it was brought to the forefront by our camp and some other small camps. And now it's become something that everybody knows about, you know. So things have started to change. Not everything for the best, obviously, but, you know, with organizations like the Coalition of Homelessness and some other places that work with the homeless population have been helping us a lot, you know, and helping make sure that they don't step all over our rights, you know. So really, like, without Mayor Breed following through with what was set out by Gavin Newsom to do the hotels, this is what we have to work with right now.
So, what else would be a good thing for folks to know? Hey, Kelley Cutler, human rights organizer at the Coalition on Homelessness. This is Benny the Rat Dog. I just got back from the encampment in the rain, and he missed me, so he's going to sit here for a minute. But, so I'm going to fill folks in on what's been going on when it comes to street homelessness here in San Francisco since COVID. Homelessness was a huge challenge even before a global pandemic, so we basically have a crisis on top of the current crisis that we were already dealing with. Since COVID, there's a number of things that have happened that have made things much harder. We've lost about 1,000 shelter beds within our system because they've had to space out people within shelters. We've been advocating from the get-go for them to be putting people into hotels so that people can socially distance and they have their own bathrooms. We've also been trying to get people out of SROs and into hotel rooms, which has been a huge challenge. Everything's been a huge challenge every step of the way. We've not only are there 1,000 less hotel rooms, we had about 1,000 people on the shelter wait list beforehand. So there were 1,000 people waiting, as well as fewer beds now and fewer places for people to eat. I tend to be kind of relentlessly pushing back against charity when it comes to homeless. Not that charity is a bad thing, but people tend to think that's the go-to is charity when it comes to homelessness. I'm always pushing for justice. But this is a time that I'm actually pushing both. So since COVID happened, since we had shelter in place, the city has failed to create any alternatives for people who are forced to sleep on the street. Because of the lack of options, we organized to get tents out to people so that they had the bare minimum amount of protection available. And so we've gotten out about maybe over 1,500 tents to people. But the problem is that there still has been nowhere that people could legally set up encampments. The city has stopped, for the most part, taking people's tents, and they've continued doing move-along orders. It's really pretty controlled where people are at. If you notice, in certain areas there's nobody, and in other areas such as the Tenderloin, where people are packed in into that location, it's very controlled. A couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago or so, the SFPD within the Tenderloin started pushing people down to Fulton Malls, what they call it. It's in between the Asian Art Museum and the library. There was a big push where there were a couple of specific areas in the Tenderloin where the cops went in and said, hey, you guys all need to go down to this one location. And that's where it skyrocketed from within the same day that there was probably around 50, 60 people, 50, 60 tents, even more people. And then within a week, there was between 100 and 150, all within this small area. But they were actually being told to go down there. And so people go because they're looking for an area that they can go, that they're not having to worry about police coming and getting pushed out. But there was no way for people to socially distance. They were on top of each other. The thing that was really ironic was right across the street from there is the Civic Center park that is sitting empty, just like all the other parks in the city that are sitting empty. If you look back at different crises, emergencies within our community over time, that's actually what they used as the resource for people. In 1906, after the earthquake, that was the first thing that they did, is they set up tents and even, I guess nowadays you'd call them tiny homes, but they were little cabin type things that people set up, that the city set up within the parks as a temporary option for people. But we have not done that. We're currently working on legislation now to allow that to happen just during COVID, just during a global pandemic, and yet we're having to go through legislation to get that done, which really doesn't make any sense at all. These they're guarding spaces there, and it's just left empty. We're hearing a lot of things through coming from the mayor, through media. It's the same story that we're having to deal with even before COVID. There's a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of demonization of the people who are the most marginalized within our community. There's ones I've been hearing from the mayor is that people are flooding here for free hotel rooms. They're coming here for free tents. See, this is nonsense. This is what you hear all the time, no matter where you're at. Okay, poor people are always from somewhere else. But if you look at the actual data, it shows, not just here, but in all the different cities, it's around 70% of people are actually from that community who are experiencing homelessness, because people don't really want to go out of their community. That's what they know. That's where their social support is. That's where their church is. So we've been hearing this thing about people, coming from somewhere else. Part of the reason that they're doing that is that they're saying that is because all of a sudden there's more tents on the street. There's more people on the street and tents in the street. And this is what the city calls visible homelessness. We did not come up with this term to criticize them. They came up with this term, and this is a big focus that they have when it comes to homelessness, is visible homelessness. So the issue isn't visible homelessness. The issue is the lack of housing and resources for people. The visible homelessness is just about hiding people and hiding the real issue and the crisis that we've got on our hands. So they have, over the years, especially in the last 2 years, really come down hard when it comes to what we call sweeps, where they're going through and taking people's tents, taking their belongings, taking their medication, everything, and tossing it and telling people, you need to move along. You need to go somewhere else. There's no other options. When you ask, where can we go? There's no other alternative for people. There's no shelter, there's no housing, but they're told to move along, go somewhere else. So since they've stopped taking people's tents, and they literally were giving people, it's called a 647E, and it's a misdemeanor for having a tent. An example of what that looks like, there was one woman I was talking to in the Mission, and she was under the freeway overpass near a navigation center that she couldn't get into, because you can't get on a wait list or anything. It's its own system. I saw her, I walked up and there were police there, and she was getting a misdemeanor. She didn't even actually have a tent. She had a tarp that was tied up to the side of the fence under the freeway. After I talked to her, I found out that they had actually taken her tent in the morning and gave her a misdemeanor. And she said, I was just so exhausted that I went and set this up under the freeway just to get a little bit of protection so she could rest. And she got her second misdemeanor within a day. Makes no sense. The reason they're doing this is to address visible homelessness, to try and hide it. So now we're in a situation where we've handed out a lot of tents. Okay, we have. It's a huge need, but this is not a time where people are taking up urban camping during a pandemic. Makes no sense, because it doesn't make sense. It's not sense, really. But what we're seeing is really the issue that has been within our community that the city's been trying to hide. It's it's been a facade. We had Lilani is this woman was a UN rapporteur that came and did a tour here because she was doing. Gosh, my dog's so pathetic. She was doing a tour regarding encampments, and we were walking along, and see, I've been doing street outreach here in the city and working in homelessness for over 18 years or so, and so this is like my norm. This is just what I'm used to. It's it's kind of sick, but it's what I know. And we're walking along, and she turns to me and she's like, this is stunning. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? And she said, this is stunning, where she had been in, where was she? Dubai, I think. She was in the slums of someplace the week before, and where there was extreme poverty. She says, but here there's no place people can even exist. She says, at least there they've got the slums and they leave them alone, but here your mere existence is criminalized. It's illegal. You basically have to be walking all the time because it's against the law to sit or lie down. Liberal progressive San Francisco, we have the most anti-homeless laws out of any city in California. So it's just, it's a huge crisis. So for the past couple years, the city created this thing. It's called the Healthy Streets Operations Center, HSOC. And this is the city's coordinated response to homelessness, to street homelessness. And in theory, it sounds good, where you've got everyone working together and the appropriate entity would be responding. But in theory, it does sound good. The problem is the reality and how it actually plays out. They say that, we wish that like the homeless department would be the lead, that they'd send outreach and they would connect them with resources. But the reality is that we don't have the resources, and so this effort was being led by SFPD and Department of Public Works. So that's how they were able to pull off these massive sweeps across the city. I meet with organizers across the country, and they say San Francisco's brutal. Like, we have a reputation here when it comes to people experiencing homelessness, of the brutality from our city. And so we have this complaint-driven system. When you hear the city talking about a tent count, they talk about that a lot, and that's actually what leads their policy, are tent counts and complaints. It's a complaint-driven system. And after the mayor became mayor, a few months later, she put out a press release and said, since I've become mayor, I've decreased the number of tents by 34%. When I saw that, I said, well, did you increase the resources that much, or did you just take people's survival gear and take their tents? And the answer is pretty clear. It's took the tents. So it's a bit frustrating to be hearing about that tents are still leading the efforts. So they put together, the most recent thing put together was this TL plan, the Tenderloin plan. This is where they're starting. They intentionally kept different community groups out of it. They kept the coalition out of it. They kept me out of it. I'm on the local homeless coordinating board and should really be a part of that. And the reason they kept it out is because most of it's being police led. So we're still in shelter in place, and the focus is once again on tents. And we don't advocate for tents. Nobody advocates that tents are adequate and appropriate housing, that it's that it's the best option. It's not, but we're in an emergency, and so it is the least that we could be doing for people at the moment. So while we're still in shelter in place, they're talking about this plan to go through block by block, and they've even talked about giving people citations. They're talking about basically they're talking enforcement, and once again the missing piece are alternatives. There are no alternatives for people. The people that were sent down to where across from City Hall, next to the Asian Art Museum, this large encampment, where there were between 100, 150 people, they did open up an encampment, but it's only for 50 people. And this is the only one in the city, and this is the only thing that's been created for people on the street. So for them to be talking about enforcement, you got to look at the whole picture and see if it adds up, because it doesn't add up. For my experience, and also with others who've been working on the front line, working in this for ages, when we saw what was happening, the crisis on top of our current crisis, I think there's a number of us that thought that it's like maybe since it's a global pandemic, that it might be different this time, that the city might step up and do what's right to care for our folks within our community. And so we really try to hold on to hope. as we're fighting hard every single day. And it's been really frustrating to see that we're still dealing with the same battles. It's frustrating to see that we've been having to fight every step of the way for the littlest things, and where we're hearing this narrative going out saying people are coming here from somewhere else. Also that where people have been, where it's been a setup for people that you've got no options, you can't go into shelter, you can't do any of this, but then you need to be socially distancing, you need to be doing this, but there's no space where people can do that. So we reached out to the city. We work with the city on a lot of things. Sometimes we're a thorn in their side, but that's okay. I'm also a thorn in the side of the Archbishop. He's stuck with me, you know. But one of the things when there was a shelter in place, we asked about the tent policy, because we were handing out a bunch of tents. People were donating and contributing because it's a huge need. And I said, what is the policy? Because we know it's against the law to have a tent, but what is the policy during this pandemic? And they said, okay, well, people need to be 6 feet apart. They need to have, their tents need to be 6 feet apart. One person per tent, 5 people per block. And the one piece that was missing time and time again, it's still missing, is where people can actually be. Because people are told where they can't be. They can't be in the park. They can't be in business corridors. You can't be anywhere, basically. And they haven't provided where people can be. So they've created this issue where when they are being told, here, go down by City Hall, and people go because they just want to be safe. And then the city turns around and see, they're not socially distancing. They're putting the blame on folks that have no options. I'll give a couple examples of actually how bad it is and the reason that we are giving out tents. One of them is, I get calls on a regular basis from people who work at General Hospital and having to discharge people, and there are no alternatives for people. And they're calling us, asking us to get them tents so that they can at least give someone a tent for a little bit of safety as they're being discharged from the hospital. Okay, they should be going into a hotel. We have it. They're sitting here empty, and yet, I don't know. And yet, we're dealing with the same greed and the valuing possessions or empty rooms more than the lives of people who are in our community. Another example I'll give is we have, there was someone who's been well known here, name's Ian. He was a hate, up in the hate. He was one of the hate kids for many years. And he's been in his 30s or so, and he's been having a lot of really serious health issues and having blood transfusions. And over the past 3 months, for about 2 months of it, was in the hospital. So about 2 weeks ago, Ian was discharged from the hospital, and service providers up in the Haight were trying to get these hotel rooms. We keep hearing about these hotel rooms, and they were trying to get these hotel rooms, and they weren't able to get one for him, and Ian ended up dying on the street. We have one of our service providers in the Haight who does amazing work, has for years, and she had to go out and identify his body, and knowing after she had been fighting to try and get him help. And so folks on the front line are dealing with a lot right now. There's many things that are disheartening because we knew the system was broken, but it was like, wow, even during a global pandemic. I live in the Tenderloin, so it's a little noisy. Best neighborhood in the city, but maybe biased. But the thing that's actually been really cool is watching as the community's been coming together and wanting to help and wanting to fight back. I've been thrilled that Faith in Action and different faith communities are wanting to get more involved in throwing down and pushing back, because this is a moral issue. This is a moral issue within our community. I'm loving that people are getting more involved. So the mayor's saying, oh, they're coming in from somewhere else. And she says, oh, we can't just open up hotel rooms and have it be a free-for-all. And she says, this isn't easy. And it's like, yeah, we know it's not easy, but it's really important. And we need to figure it out. I'm on the board of Hospitality House, which is a direct service provider here in the city. And we have a shelter. And they saw, it's a smaller shelter, but they knew that it was safer for people to be in a hotel rather than in a congregate setting. So knowing that we had to get people safe, we said, okay, let's just figure it out. We're gonna get people into hotels. We decided we're going against what the city's doing, and we're gonna get people hotels. And we figured it out, and we did it. And we got people safe, and they're in there. And really, we're gonna, probably there's going to be some repercussions from the city, where there was a couple people that wouldn't go, and the reason that they wouldn't go is not that they didn't want to go, is that if they left, then they would lose their shelter bed at Hospitality House, because the city, that's how it works. And so it's been a struggle, and it's not going to be ending anytime soon. A big thing right now that we need is within the different communities, and we could be using rec and park land, because there's parks all over the city. We need to be setting up just safe spaces where people can be, and then where people can set up tents, and then we can actually provide resources. You can provide food. You can do an emergency response. And this is something that it would be great also if faith communities within their own neighborhood to be helping to make this happen, because we will be advocating hard and trying to organize it, but it's been really slow moving. How many weeks are we into this, and the city has failed to do the basic thing that they should have done the very first week? The state is shut down. We've done all these extreme measures, and yet we have just left people on the street. And when I go out there, every single day that I'm going out, I am encountering people who can deal with a lot, are real fighters, because the experience of homelessness is really, really hard. It's not something for, if you're lazy, don't become homeless, because it's a lot of work. But I'm encountering people on a daily basis in tears. And what's really challenging is that I don't have answers for them, because there aren't resources available. And I know that I don't have things to offer them. I can get them a tent, and I can continue to fight this larger issue and to create more change. But there's a lot of desperation. There's a lot of fear. That's what a lot of it is. And so many of our folks have been so traumatized, where the experience of homelessness is compounding trauma. And this is more trauma. And I was seeing with the encampment on down by City Hall, next to the Asian Art Museum, and I was seeing with things that were happening with law enforcement that's down there messing with them, doing their lights all hours of the night, and and I'm seeing where a lot of folks have PTSD from this, and I'm seeing where people are being triggered by things, and there's a lot of fear with people in the street. Everyone wants to be safe. Everyone wants a place that's clean, that is, adequate housing and safety, basic safety. And that's the goal, is just to get people safe. Okay, I've rambled on, much longer, and I need to hop into a meeting, but I'll get this over. Benny says hi. Right there. Health and justice for all.
Good morning, I'm Alison Faison, Director of Children and Family Ministries at Calvary Presbyterian Church, San Francisco. For 23 years, I've been a renter and an educator in San Francisco. I've learned a lot about the city's goals by being a parent of San Francisco Unified School District, being a student at City College for early childhood education, being a colleague of child care team, and learning from the Human Rights Commission. I've also learned a lot from Calvary's Faith in Action team, our pastors, and Faith in Action Bay Area. This week, Faith in Action Bay Area continues its work to support neighbors through the Reclaiming the Soul of the City campaign, Hotels for the Unhoused, and Belong Emergency Fund, which asks people to donate their stimulus funds to immigrant families who have lost work or wages due to coronavirus and can't access federal stimulus and unemployment funds. Active participants have met to strategize and meet with California Senator Scott Wiener, Fernando Marti, who's the co-director of Council of Community Housing Organizations, and Jackie Fielder, a candidate for California State Senate and an expert on public banking. 2 years ago, I got a taste of these direct forms of civic action with Faith in Action Bay Area by joining the clergy and lay leader cohort. When doing social actions at City Hall alongside these seasoned and respectful clergy, I experienced a deep sense of faith and solidarity. Faith in Action Bay Area has initiated direct conversations with district supervisors, attended housing meetings, participated in Facebook and Zoom faith vigils, and supported a cohort to visit the mayor about housing people in San Francisco. All of these actions involved advocating for longtime senior adult residents, immigrant families, and vulnerable populations who were being evicted by landlords, being pushed out of their neighborhoods because of new construction demands, or they were already unhoused due to the high cost of living and other systems of poverty. As you're hearing today in this adult ed panel, the past 2 months during the time of COVID-19 have resulted in unhoused people sheltering in tents on the street instead of occupying all of the 30,000 empty hotel rooms. So I'm out here in the garden, which is not out on the street, and I'm very thankful to be living here. The garden is a microcosm of our city. This morning I saw that this passion flower plant, which is behind me, was growing its vines and wrapping its tendrils around 6 other plants, as well as harboring weeds and shutting out sunlight to plants below. It was time to prune it back. There's a big pile below me of a huge bunch of vines. That was my meditation this morning. In 2019, Faith in Action Bay Area countered the monster in the mission and defeated a billionaire from displacing long-term mission residents. My action here in the backyard is much smaller, but it relates. Taming the boundaries of the monster vines and clearing weeds underneath to make room for the milkweed, fennel, and pipevine plants will help biodiversity and welcome monarch, swallowtail, Gulf fritillary, and pipevine butterflies so that they can continue a healthy life cycle. Butterflies are not people, and I'm not making that equivalent, but Our city's biodiversity depends on creating access and space for each person to grow roots in their home and community, access clean water, nourishing food, education, and a steady income, and have the ease to contribute back to their community. If we allow monster vines to grasp and overshadow, we're left with one type of butterfly. Nature has told us time and time again that monocrop or monoculture is an unsustainable and damaging illusion. As we speak, teams of people are working together in faith and action at Calvary, in the Bay Area, and statewide to provide masks, food, tents, and ultimately unity, power, and voice to people caught in cycles of poverty and the effects of institutionalized racism. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Since we're not able to meet in person right now, I've collected a few questions in advance from Calvary Presbyterian members, volunteers, and staff. So here we go. So Kelley, question for you. How's the Coalition for Homelessness partnering to support the city in the complexity of housing people in open hotel rooms, as that is not a straightforward, easy thing to do, since most of them need supportive services alongside the housing? Has the city reached out to many other nonprofits and coalitions whose staffs have expertise in this area? And if so, who and how is that working?
Yes, there's a very big, complex answer to it because we're having to come together for everything that we're doing to get enough people to be working on the front line. The city is organizing it, and so we are getting the word out and directing folks over to the city as they're organizing it. There's certain things that we've been advocating for example, with shutting down the shelters and actually moving the staff over to the hotel facilities, as well as there's actually a lot of people that are experiencing homelessness that the big issue is not having the money to cover a hotel. And so they're really pretty self-sufficient and maybe a little bit of help of food or something. They really don't need a lot of other assistance. And so we're having to kind of balance that. But a lot of it, we're trying to work with the city and to be connecting folks with the city altogether.
Great. So what can the housed citizens of San Francisco do to facilitate moving the unhoused into hotel rooms or other safe, clean spaces where they can shelter in place? And what other things can we do to support the unhoused more generally during this COVID crisis?
Well, one of the ways, and I think Alison can speak about it, is with faith and action, because things are moving really fast. And so there's things popping up all the time. And we're able to loop in other groups if it's supporting a letter or campaign, or just encouraging the mayor to be acting. And so that's a piece of it. Another thing right now, though, and I'm usually known for, between the charity and justice, I'm always pushing for the justice when it comes to homelessness, because people think of charity automatically. But this is also a really important time for the charity piece as well. To be, for example, we've been getting people tents because there are no alternatives. And to be supporting just within our own smaller communities, to be pushing for the city to be creating space that people can even just be, like for encampments, and they can be supported, because at this point we don't have any from the city. They're working on doing their first one this many weeks in, but we don't currently have that. I'm gonna hand to Alison there.
Well, Faith in Action Bay Area is very active, especially right now. In the past 8 weeks has been very active. I know this week there are several research meetings and they're on Zoom. So I think many meetings are open. One would just need to contact Sarah Miles or Matt Alexander to join those meetings. I think they're meeting with California Senator Scott Wiener, and there are 4 other meetings this week. We also have a call campaign, and so we've been calling thousands of people. So seniors, neighborhood, friends of Faith in Action, just really connecting and then having meetings to talk about what's next and what are the needs. We've been hearing a lot about what the needs are, and then, do we have the capacity to fulfill them, and do we not?
Wonderful. So here's an interesting question. So Mayor London Breed has been praised in a lot of national publications, yet locally there's more criticism, specifically about the response for homeless people. What are some good sources of news media for a more balanced perspective?
When it comes to homelessness, I encourage people to really to really think about what is being put in print, because sometimes it's just like nonsense. We do have some local ones that are really on point, though. I got to say, Street Sheet is the number one. Maybe a little biased, but it's pretty good. And some other ones that have been doing really good work are Mission Local. Amazing, has been getting the scoops, has been right on top of it, as well as the Examiner has been doing some good stuff in 48 Hills. Those are like the local ones, but yeah, media in general, you just want to look for the information that's backing things up, because sometimes it's just social stigma and things like that that are being put out there because they don't understand.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in. What kind of galvanized me to become a little more vocal, and I've done what I can given the situation right now. Not enough and not as much as I can, but what I think I can. When I heard the mayor's talking points with all of the city directors saying that homeless people are too complicated to help right now because of the crisis, that homeless people are inherently violent and drug addicted, which is just not true. We have homeless people who worship at Calvary, who come every week, and many of you know them. We have had homeless deacons serving at Calvary. We have, we know people that prove that talking point wrong. And so I like to read Street Sheet because if I want to know about you, I'll come and ask you about you. I could ask Allison about you, but that would be Allison's version of you. But if you want to know how you are doing, you ask yourself. So I would say read the Street Sheet. And of course it's biased because it's written on the street, by the street, and people who are helping people on the street. So I think the Street Sheet is an important theological document that should be read a lot. And Mission Local has been amazing. The expose on the Bay Area counties and how Santa Clara was supposed to be the leader of all of the response, and how San Francisco stepped ahead to have a press conference before they could hold their press conference was just kind of mind-blowing. But I am very thankful to the mayor that we're safe as we are. But I am appalled when I see all of the people who are not being sheltered.
So speaking of Street Sheet, what's happened to that? And what about the vendors? What's happened to them? We miss Charles, who sold Street Sheet at our church.
I miss him too. I miss him too.
Charles, if you're watching.
Has been some very difficult discussions that we've had about the Street Sheet. Because we have never stopped in the past over 30 years putting out the Street Sheet. So it's been consistent, and we continue to do it online. But right now we had to assess the safety of the community, and but we are also in communication with other street papers like ours, and they all had to stop, at least for the print version of it at the moment. But we didn't want to just leave folks hanging, because a lot of people really depend on that for food and for actually for a lot of things. And so what we started instead, as we've had this period of pause for people selling street sheets, we've been doing a GoFundMe, and we're going to be getting some money to the different vendors, because we didn't want to leave them hanging. But all these things are kind of fluid still, because we don't really know how long things are going to be or what's going to happen. But in the immediate, that's what we're currently doing.
So where can we find more information about the street sheet online and the GoFundMe?
There's we use a lot of social media to be getting out the different stories. You can also sign up, and I can provide you a link with where we'll send out updates for folks. But we definitely use Facebook and Twitter and the other ones, but I have the younger folks I work with to do the other ones, because I'm like, I don't know how to do those. And one of the things that I do is I write about, particularly with encampments and what's going on the street, and that we continue to put out.
There's also streetsheet.org, and that
Yes.
goes to street sheet, so you could look at that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And about Charles, just for people at Calvary, there was a Charles sighting right when the shelter in place was beginning, and Dale and Sherbonnet, those of you at Calvary know who I'm speaking of, they saw Charles down at the Embarcadero, and that he was okay, and he was having a big meal at the time, picnic table, which sounds right.
Kelley, what's your point of view on the city's efforts to deal with the situation in the Tenderloin? And combined with that, what role do you see churches and other nonprofits being able to play?
That's another huge question. Well, at this point, what we've been seeing on the street, there's been a lot of talk about hotel rooms, and we've really been pushing for hotel rooms, because that is the safest approach and response we should be doing. But also there's a lot of people that are forced to sleep on the street. And so we've had it where the shelters are shut down, where you can't get into a shelter. It's been weeks that this has been this way. And the immediate response from the city has been really lacking, where they have not created an encampment. You know, they did this. This is not something new. In 1906, after the earthquake, they created encampments in the parks, and we're having to battle every step of the way, even to be able to allow that to happen. So they've been pushing people into the Tenderloin, more and more people, without creating options. And one of the things that we did is that we handed out tents, because it's, the bare minimum to try and protect people, but there still isn't anywhere that people can go, so they're being smushed together. So at this point, we're really needing to expand and create spaces that are safe for folks. And that's something that with faith communities that could be really helpful in, one, to be advocating for spaces to be created, but also there's different neighborhoods and communities that are needing just the support of even faith communities with things such as providing meals and supporting the different communities. I'm hearing about this in the Mission right now, that there's a community there that, and I've reached out to some of the parishes over there to be able to help and support folks within their parish area. So that's one example. With the Tenderloin and specifically, they have the TL plan, and it's very concerning because we were intentionally kept out of this, even though I live and work in the TL, and I'm on the local homeless coordinating board. There's a lot of reasons that I should have been part of this. But what we're seeing is that a lot of it is being led with law enforcement once again. So we are up against that battle where we can't arrest our way out of homelessness. We can't arrest our way out of this pandemic. We need to actually create concrete places where people can be, because we can't just tell people to move along. So that's where we're at right now within the struggle.
I have a couple more comments for the Tenderloin. I think it's District 6. And so Matt Haney has been extremely active. So if you want to look up Matt Haney on Facebook, he's handing out masks. He's working with United Playas to hand out PPE, just working with people constantly. And he is advocating every day to get people housed in hotels. So he's one that has a running dialogue. And then I know with our Safe House, Tony Ebby, who's the director there, she secured hotels for like $89 a night. So there are many pieces in play coming together. But again, as you brought up, Kelley, who can afford $80 a night, so I don't know. But there are many groups working together, not just the Tenderloin, but those are the ones that I know of right now.
Oh.
Okay, I can do this. I would ask people as they consider how to act, and look at the situation and read, look for decisions that are being made to satisfy complaints rather than to help the people who are in the greatest pain. All of the decisions have been made in favor of businesses, which are important, of course, but in favor of businesses and neighborhood complaints. Things that you hear on Nextdoor are just appalling about homeless people. And those complaints are what's driving the system. And it's not a system that is being driven by what can we do to alleviate pain, and of actual people who are destitute and in great need in a city of billionaires. And that's, I really urge you to try that on and see how it changes things.
Well, Kelley, Alison, and Victor, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to share this important information about what's happening in our city. And thank you for helping our unhoused neighbors in need. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Reverend Joanne Witt, who will close the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. I want to thank Kelley Cutler from the Coalition on Homelessness and our own Victor Floyd and Alison Faison for their time and for their passion. We're so very grateful for the work that all of you are doing, and we're glad that Calvary can be a part of it. A huge thanks as well to the team that helped make this happen, including Michael Conley, our director of music, who doubles as our video editor. Thank you for joining us, and have a blessed day.